Hey everybody, this is Josh Jackson with Geekscape.net coming at you again with another unboxing. This time we are going to go over the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Starter deck Link Strike, which is a big deck for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game because this is the first one that's focusing on Link Summoning, the new format that's coming to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Universe. If you're not familiar, every few years they do a big format change, both in the anime and in the card game, where they add a new summoning type, but Link Summoning is changing the game in drastic ways that is kind of unheard of from past format changes. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it. The new cards highlighted, of course, are going to be the Link Summoning monsters. So we'll start with those, since those are the highlights of the deck. The main card is Decode Talker, and we'll explain how this works. If you can tell, it doesn't have defense points, but instead it has a link number, which means it needs 3 cards to be tributed in order to summon it. It says its summoning effect is that it needs 2 or more effect monsters tributed to be summoned. Basically, what that means is it needs a minimum of 2 effect monsters. However, it needs 3 monsters total, which is what the Link 3 means. If you're wondering what the arrows around the card mean, that's where that big change that I'm mentioning in the format comes from. So if you look at one of the new playmats, or if you look up online to see the new format of the game, basically the way that it works is that now you're limited to 1 extra deck monster on the field at any one time at the start of the game, and that goes for both you and your opponent, similar to how the field spell zone works. So what happens is when you see these arrows, when you special summon a Link Summon monster, those arrows that it's pointing to will be most likely pointing to monster zones. The ones at the bottom, in this example, are going to be pointing at the 2 monster zones surrounding your card on your side of the field. That means the 2 zones that it's pointing at are going to be able to become extra deck summon spaces as well. So once this card's on the field, ideally, if it's in the most common scenario where it's in the initial space, those 2 spaces become extra deck slots so that you can summon 2 more monsters from your extra deck. Now, if those 2 monsters end up being Link summons, they'll presumably have those arrows on different parts of their cards. So ideally, you'll be able to expand your field to allow your entire field to be full of extra deck cards, and potentially even more than you could have in the past, since you have that designated spot in addition to your other 5. So you can actually have a maximum of 7 extra deck monsters on the field, even though you can only start with 1. But in order to do that, you would have to wrap around the whole field and then take over your opponent's extra deck space as well by having a Link monster pointing up to that as well. But as of right now, it's not the most viable strategy. There's not a lot of good ways to do that in a fast way, so you're going to be wasting a bunch of turns kind of building that up when your opponent most likely is going to be building up some kind of a defense. So, of course, speed is everything in Yu-Gi-Oh! Still, even though this new format is slowing down the game significantly to what we've been used to with pendulums, or even before pendulums with your Black Wings and your 6 Samurai formats. So the idea is that you want to be able to secure your extra deck spaces and overwhelm your opponent before they're able to do the same. So if we look at Decode Talker specifically, its ability is that it starts with 2,300 attack points. It gains 500 attack points for each monster it's pointing to. When your opponent activates a card or effect that targets this card, you contribute 1 monster this card points to and negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. So basically, as long as these arrows are pointing to a monster, you'll be able to kind of protect it, and it also gains strength for every card it's pointing to. It could point to a maximum of 3, and the interesting to point out is that this arrow up top, if you summon it in its most common space, which is that designated extra deck spot, you will be pointing at an opponent's monster side. So the drawback is that you're giving your opponent an extra space to do their extra summons without any effort on their part. So it gives them a better way to come back. However, if they already have a monster on that space, your card's going to be benefiting from it, and you also have the option to sacrifice their monster to protect yourself. At least that's my understanding. So with that in mind, it makes it a it makes it somewhat of a gamble, but if you play it right, you should be able to make the most out of it. So the next card is Link Spider. It's another Link summon card, and with one arrow pointing down. Its Link effect, it's a Cyberse type monster, which is obviously a new type. You need one normal monster to summon it with just one Link, so just that one normal monster is all you need. And once per turn, you can special summon one level 4 or lower normal monster from your hand to the zone that your card points to. So this card will give you an extra special summon, but basically it's only going to be for a space pointing directly below it. So essentially, if it's in any spot other than the initial extra deck zone that's above your normal monster zone, it pointing down means that it's going to be useless anywhere but that space. So that's something to keep in mind when using it. The last Link monster in the set is Honeybot, which has an arrow pointing to the left and right. So let's see what that does. It's another Cyberse monster, the Link with an effect, of course. It needs 2 Cyberse monsters to be tributed with a 2 Link, so that's all you need. And neither player can target monsters this card points to with card effects, and those monsters cannot be destroyed by battle. So it has 1900 attack points, so it can somewhat protect itself from the most basic monsters, and it gives protection to either monsters on either side of it. So depending what you have on your field, positioning is a lot more strategic this time around in this new format. So if you have something to the left and right of it that you want to keep protected, now it's protected from both card effects and from being destroyed by battle. So it's, until Honeybot's removed from the field, it's kind of protected pretty well, I think. So that's it for the Link monsters, but moving on, we have 2 new ones. That are both the rare, or super rare, I should say, levels of rarity. So we have Ram Clouder, Cyberse monster, 4 stars. You contribute 1 monster, then target 1 Cyberse monster in your graveyard, special summon it. You can only use this effect once per turn. So basically, every time you get it, if you have something to tribute, you can infinitely revive any one of your Cyberse monsters that are in the graveyard. That's another peculiar thing on the new card. They abbreviate graveyard to GY, which is weird. I had to read that over a couple times, and I kept thinking I was misreading something, but just another one of the changes that they're going through with this new set, no matter how small it is. So then, the last one we're going over is Link Slayer, which is a ultra rare effect monster, Cyberse type. Its effect: if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. Once per turn, you can discard up to 2 cards, then target that many spells and traps on the field and destroy them. So basically, it's giving you 2 MSTs, or 2 Mystical Space Typhoons, if you have 2 cards to discard every turn. You could special summon it with no cost. Normally, you'd have to tribute summon 1 since it's a 6-star monster. But if you special summon it, it's similar to Cyber Dragon, where if you have nothing, you could just throw it on the field without cost. Ideally, you can normal summon again after that. And since you could destroy up to 2 spells every turn as long as you have 2 cards to discard, it kind of gives you an extra layer of protection from any kind of traps or spells that might throw a wrench into the strategies you're trying to set up. So that's it for those. We're going to go over we're going to do a speed round on the common cards, since a lot of those are older ones that we've seen before, but of course they're still helpful. In fact, a lot of these I haven't kept too closely with tournament rules and ban lists in the last few months, so honestly, I'm not sure how long a lot of these have been unbanned, but I was surprised at how many cards that had been banned for such a long time that are in this deck. So I'm assuming that they're at least somewhat semi-limited and not just completely banned. But we'll go through it. Of course, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments. I'll need a lot of catching up to do because, like I said, I've kind of fell out a little bit for the last 6 months. So there might be some information that I'm not aware of. So anyway, moving on. We've got Bitron, Draconet, Galaxy Serpent, Mystery Shell Dragon, Beast King Barbaros, which was a very popular card a few years back, Cyber Dragon, which is one of my all-time favorites, both because of its unique summon abilities that I just talked about, and because it was one of Zane's maiden cards, which was kind of like one of the Kaiba replacements in GX, and Kaiba's my favorite character. GX is my favorite series, so of course I'm going to flock to the dragons. You got Photon Thrasher, Xarion Universe, Evil Swarm Mandragora, so you got some extra Evil Swarm support, Marauding Captain, which is another old favorite, and our first card that I could swear had been banned for a very long time, which was Sangan, which is a very powerful card at the very, very beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh! If I remember correctly, it was in the original set, and I haven't really seen it pop up in decks in a very long time, but again, I could be wrong since I haven't been keeping up as closely as I should have. We got Curry Bandit, which of course is like a little evil Karibo. Marshmelon, one of Yugi's old trademark cards, which is very hard to destroy as long as it's in defense mode. Here's another one that was setting the world on fire a few years back, Card D. So lets you draw cards fairly easy. Got Battle Fader, Swift Scarecrow, Effect Veiler, Raikou Lightsworn Hunter. So one of the more popular Lightsworn cards makes an appearance here too. So that's it for the monster cards. Now moving on to the spells. Forbidden Lance, and I'm sure you'll recognize most of these because a lot of these are actually returning cards. Signet Universe, which is a new field card. Book of Moon, another old favorite. Flips an opponent's monster to defense mode face down, or any monster you target actually. United We Stand, an equip card where every monster on your side of the field, where the card equipped to it gains attack points for every card on your side of the field, or every monster on your side of the field. Pot of Duality, lets you draw extra cards. Burden of the Mighty, which kind of restricts stronger monsters. Mystical Space Typhoon, a staple in almost every deck, which lets you quick play a spell card to destroy a trap or spell on the field, I should say. Terraforming, so it lets you search for a field spell card. Supply Squad. Monster Reincarnation, so it lets you put cards back into your hand from the graveyard. Dark Hole, which completely wipes out the field of monster cards on both sides of the field. Call of the Haunted, which lets you revive a monster and special summon it to the field, as long as that trap card's on the field. And I should say now we're moving into the traps, of course. Mirror Force, which counters an opponent's attack and destroys all of your opponent's monsters in attack position. Jar of Avarice, which lets you draw more cards, which of course is vital to the game. Torrential Tribute, which is pretty much like Dark Hole, but as a trap card, so it destroys all monsters on both sides of the field. One of my favorite early Yu-Gi-Oh cards, which had been banned for the longest time. I don't know if it's still banned, I don't know if it's been unbanned recently, but Ring of Destruction. I used to love setting this card up where I would put a really powerful monster on the field, and then when the opponent's life points were less than that monster's attack, I would use that on my own card, destroy it, and damage both of us for that monster's attack point level. So it was just a great kind of cheap way to get a quick win. Another popular one, Bottomless Trap Hole, which has been a staple in competitive decks over the last year or two, unless that's again changed recently. So basically when you summon a monster with below a certain level, it's just automatically banished. Compulsion Evacuation Device, Dark Bribe, and finally Fiendish Chain. So that rounds out the deck. Again, another change that I wanted to talk about that is in this set that isn't in, that's kind of debuting with this link summoning format, is that in the past, the Pendulum Summon Zone was its own zone next to like the field spell cards. Now that's changing. That space is kind of being taken up by that extra deck space that I was talking about. Now the pendulum zones are the farthest left and farthest right spaces of your spell zone. So if you're using pendulum monsters, each pendulum space that you're using with those monsters takes away a spell zone from your field. So basically, if you have 2 pendulum monsters on the field, now you can only set 3 spell or trap cards. If you have 1 pendulum monster down, you could set 4 because you can set a trap card on that pendulum zone as well as another pendulum monster once that space is freed up. But again, positioning is really important, because if you fill your spell zone with set trap cards, for example, and you get a pendulum monster you want to summon, you have to find a way to get rid of your own trap card, so you can kind of sabotage yourself if you're not careful. So with the limitations on extra deck summoning, the limitations on pendulum summoning to a degree, and just so many changes in this format, like, it does render a lot of older decks useless, which I think is kind of the idea, because to me it's a double-edged sword. I'm honestly nervous about them changing the game so fundamentally, especially because like I said, my favorite deck to run, even though it's not really viable anymore, my old favorite deck was the YuGiOhs, and having such restrictions on summoning from the extra deck, which that deck revolves around, it can't be played anymore. It just flat out can't be played. I know it's to help cut down on a lot of the pendulum decks, like Six Samurai, Black Wings over the last few years, and just so many different formats where you could just fill the field instantly with like 5 monsters and have your strongest stuff out immediately. It's a step in the right direction, in the sense that the game won't be completely focused on that anymore, and it'll give other cards a chance to do well. At the same time, it's, like I said, it's so fundamentally changing that it's kind of a scary time for Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, because we have no idea, like, as support rolls out, we have no idea if this is really going to catch on, if people are really going to like it. And if there's anything that people are afraid of most, it feels like it's change. And so changing it so fundamentally is a big risk. But at the same time, I want to commend the team for being gutsy enough to be able to make such a big fundamental alteration to their game. And with all of the faith in the world in the team, because I'm still having fun with this game, 15 years later, I feel like they can do something really, really positive and something really transformative with this new format. It's just, they're just going to have to tread a little carefully and not... And I know the idea with new formats is to encourage people to buy new cards, keep the revenue stream rolling in, of course, but at the same time, you don't want to render cards completely useless, especially cards that just came out like a year or so ago, because now Pendulum, of course, is going to be restricted. A lot of the new extra cards, say from the new Blue Eye support that came out over the last year or so, that's going to be harder to use with the restrictions on extra deck usage. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. This deck in particular, I think, gives a good taste of both the new and the old. If anyone's a new player, now's a perfect time to jump in, because everybody's somewhat starting with a clean slate. Whereas old players, if they want to get used to the new format, like I said, this is a mix of new and old, so it's not going to be completely foreign, but at the same time, it kind of eases you into the new format. So I encourage everyone to check it out. Of course, it's only like $10 to check out and play, to pick up at your stores. So as always, make sure to mention in the comments what you're worried about, what you think the direction should be with Yu-Gi-Oh! Going forward. What cards did you like in this deck? What do you think it needs? Tell us what you think cards could be added to this to make it even stronger. And as always, make sure to hit the subscribe button, like us. Head over to Geekscape.net for more in-depth articles on all of your geek news and all your geek fandom. As always, I'm YuGiOh on Twitter, @YuGiOh, Instagram, @YuGiOh. Make sure to subscribe again, and just make sure to head over and check out everything we've got. So we're going to be doing more of these going forward, so please check them out. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.